Hello all, and welcome to the Sewcialites quilt-along blog and video tutorial for the number 32 bright block. And this will be the last block for this weekend. I did 30 through 32 today, filming wise, and I will post them over the next day or so as well. So for this one, I am doing the 9-inch block. And what you're going to need is you're going to need 1 4-inch square of your background, 2 3 7/8 inch squares, which you're going to cut in half once to get triangles out of, and you're going to get 4 of those. You're going to also need 2 3 1/2 inch squares and 4 2-inch squares. And then for your print, you're going to need 1 big 4-inch square, 1 3 1/2 inch square, and then 4 2 3 inch squares that you will then cut in half once to get triangles, and you are going to get 8 of those. And so for the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to focus on E and A, which are 4-inch squares. And as you can see for this piece of my background, I've already drawn a line across diagonally on it. And now I'm going to place the good sides together like this, making sure it's all nicely lined up. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance on either side of that line, and then cut on the line and then press towards my dark print fabric. So that's the first thing we're going to do. So I have completed my 2 half triangle blocks, and now what we need to do is we need to trim them down to 3 1/2 inch squares. So how I do it is I like to have my diagonal line kind of going this way, and then I have a Omni Grip ruler, which I really like because it marks off a lot of different measurements, and then on top of it, it helps you more easily square blocks. So for this, because this line is facing this way, I want to make sure this line is going to actually measure up on here. And so I'll put it onto my block, and then I'll kind of try and fit so that I'm within the 3 1/2 inches on all sides somewhat, if you can. If not, then you're going to have to push it right up to the edge and then trim and then flip. So I have it where I think I like it. It's lined up here, so you know that this is going to be the very center of your block. And I'm going to take my rotary cutter and then trim off one side, and then take it completely flipped around because this is a nice right triangle right there. And now you can put that right up in your grid to your 3 1/2 inch square right here, and then trim off the rest of that block. So there's one down. And then I'll also do it really quickly with this one as well. Line it up as best you can, making sure this is in your centerpiece, and then pressing down, trim 2 sides, completely flip so that that nice fresh trim side is now going to line up against your your 3 1/2 inch mark here on your ruler. Press down firmly, making sure it doesn't move. Trim one more time. And there are your 2 squared half triangle blocks ready to go. Okay, so now that I have those done, I'm going to move on to my B and G fabrics. So the basic layout of your B and Gs, and you're also going to need your Ds for this, which is your 2-inch blocks. So I like spreading those out a little bit. They always like to stick together right when I'm filming. So the first thing you kind of want to have is you're going to have one of your B half triangles right there, and you're going to put this corner like kind of directly in the middle. And see where these triangle pieces are missing? That's where you're going to have your G pieces. So of course, the first thing to do on here is to sew your G's onto your D block first. So you're going to fold this down, making sure this corner meets nicely. So with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, you can trim that little nub off, press it out or press it in technically. And then you're going to take this one, fold it over, making sure those right triangle corners, the right angles meet right here, the 90-degree angles are meeting. So with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, press out. And that will basically shrink this down so that it will feed it up nicely to this piece. And then you're going to take this piece and then fold it over and sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance and then press out. So I'm going to lay all my blocks out. And then I will start sewing these pieces together and get those together. And then I will come back to you when I need to sew it onto this larger triangular piece. So making sure that they're all facing the same way. And that your good side fabrics are out. We're going to do that lineup again. So here, basic lineup. It doesn't have to be perfect right now. You just want to make sure you're sewing your triangles on the right way, or else you're going to have to unpick your stitches, and that's never fun. So like this. And now I can start sandwiching those pieces together, probably doing chain piecing. So I'll take this first triangle on all these pieces, fold them down and sew them all to the D's. Press them, trim off the extra edges, then take the second one, fold it down, 1/4 inch seam allowance on all 4 of these, press that out, and then we'll be at sewing on your B pieces. So I'll come back to you once I've sewn these 3 pieces together on all of my half triangles. So I finished sewing these pieces together, so now they're half triangles. And now what we can do is flip these down, line up the edges, and sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And try and make sure that your corner, your right angles of your triangles are also lining up with that square at the bottom. And then once you have those all lined out, sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance across, and then probably I'll be pressing towards my larger half triangle just to make it lie a little flatter. So I can sew now with a 1/4 inch seam allowance across these, and then we'll have those 4 blocks completed. Now I have 4 of my cat's cradles complete, and the other pieces are ready to go, so now we can start putting this block together. So I like to start off with my larger blocks, so these are your 3.5 inch pieces. So for this one, you're going to have your print in the middle, and then you're going to have your background blocks diagonal from each other like this. And then for the next piece, you're going to have your cat's cradles. So you're going to make sure that your 2 inch square background block is facing inwards into these center areas. So I'm going to put one here, take the other one, rotate it, make sure that they're diagonal from each other, those squares. And you're going to do the same down here, like this, and then like this. And then our last blocks that we have to add are our half triangle squares, and you want to make sure that your print block is facing in like this to your blocks, like this. And that is the basic layout of the block. So now that we have it laid out, I'm going to come back and sew these 3 pieces together like that with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'll press inwards towards this square for this middle strip, and then outwards for my other strips. And once I have those strips sewn together, then I'll come back to you and we'll fold them down and sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance on both of these edges to complete the block. So now that I've finished sewing these 3 strips together, I've pressed outwards on my bottom and top strip, and then in the middle strip I've pressed in towards that solid block. And now what I can do is I can fold this down, sandwich those points together nicely. So with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, press open, take this one, fold it up. So with a 1/4 inch seam allowance here, fold it, press it out, and then that will be the completion of the block. So I will come back to you when I have done both of those. Here is the completed block for you. And as you can see, the points did line up quite nice. And for these seams, I pressed towards my center piece here and here. And that will be it for the number 32 bright block for the Sewcialites. If you found this tutorial helpful, please like and subscribe to my channel so I can bring you more video content and more vlog updates. And until then, I will see you next week for 2 more block installations.